From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. In Nicaragua, talks are about to begin to resolve issues around the recent violence in the country. The negotiations include the government, church, members of the private sector, and student organizations.
It's been 40 years since Maximiliano began offering panel beating and praying services in his car repair workshop. Since April 18th, few customers have come to get their car fixed. He says he has faith in the talks starting this week and that he has a message for those who continue to destabilize the country.
Please, really think about what Nicaraguans really want, because this violence is not doing us any good. It just brings more crisis and chaos. It makes the situation worse. It is benefiting someone and damaging what others will need in the future. We don't know how long it will last, and Nicaraguans hope that with the talks, the situation will get fixed in the best way possible.
Garnet is also relieved that talks between all sectors are beginning.
I trust in God that it will happen, because the truth is I can't stand the situation any longer. I can't stand that my children are not going to school, because that is delaying their education. I can't stand that everybody's worried on the streets.
Union leaders like Luis Barbosa believe the dialogue is a great step, but that those who are behind the attempts to disrupt the country must be part of it.
Because here in the trade unions we have our own proposals about social security, about outsourcing, also about workers' labor rights, and we are also talking about controlling the cost of living.
In the past few days, the private companies have announced who will be in their delegations. The government has said Daniel Ortega will take part. The talks are taking place at the Seminary of Our Lady of Fatima and are mediated by the Episcopal Conference of Nicaragua.
Our correspondent Maria Jose Diaz has more from the capital city, Managua.
We are just outside the Seminary of Our Lady of Fatima, the venue for the national dialogue. The talks were called by the government of President Daniel Ortega to bring peace and reconciliation back to the country. There are high expectations of the dialogue since the private sector and other sectors of society were invited to take part. Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes and the Episcopal Conference of Nicaragua are serving as mediators of the talks. According to an official report from the National Police, from Tuesday, 15th of May, at midnight, the Seminary of Our Lady of Fatima was declared a safe zone. The police have banned people from bringing guns or fireworks into the area. We will keep you informed.
Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno has appointed a new economic minister. Our Denise Herrera has more.
The Ecuadorian government has announced Richard Martinez will be the new Minister of Economy, replacing Maria Elsa Viteri. New Minister Martinez, formerly the head of the Ecuadorian Business Committee, thanked Lenin Moreno on his Twitter account. This decision has sparked mixed reaction.
We believe that appointing a person linked to the private sector to be in charge of the Chamber of Commerce will try to find a way to build an alliance between the state and the private sector, something that the President of the Republic has also announced before.
During Rafael Correa's administration, he placed greater emphasis on allocating resources to the Ecuadorian people, a stark contrast to the administrations before him, whose policies were seen as benefiting the elites. Now there are calls to have more measures that will support small business.
It is necessary to open new markets because Ecuador needs to attract foreign currencies, needs to export, needs to promote big businesses in order to promote small businesses.
Former Minister Viteri has told a local media that she believes it's a terrible mistake to focus only in the private sector of the country. Moreno has reevaluating the composition of his cabinet, and the final cabinet will be revealed on May 24. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
Relatives of the kidnapped and murdered employees of the Ecuadorian newspaper El Comercio are in Colombia to ask for help to recover their bodies. The two journalists and their driver were kidnapped and murdered at the Ecuadorian-Colombian border last April. Allegedly, by the Olivier Sinisterra Front armed group. Now their families want the Colombian government to help find their bodies and to join an ongoing international investigation to determine what really happened.
We ask for help to recover the bodies. We are making all the possible efforts as a family so that we can give them a dignified burial. We need to know what is being done to recover them and why the Colombian government so far has not given the green light to the investigating commission.
A new report into electoral fraud in Colombia has unearthed a mafia network inside the National Registration Office, along with the manipulation of public documents.
Imprimir tarjetas electorales es un negocio.
Leon Valencia, director of the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation, reported that the registration office is altering the results of elections by selling vote packs.
Y eso lo venden entre $1,000.
They sell them for around $600. This is what they call an electoral reserve. These are being sold by corrupt lawyers, officials, former officials, and politicians inside the institution.
Irregularities may have been happening as far back as when election judges were first chosen. The e-forms, in which the results of each voting station are registered, were manipulated.
We don't like the random and shady way in which the people in charge of every polling station were selected. Before, there were also people arriving at the stations even before the people in charge had arrived. In second place, there were more than 2,000 E14 forms that don't match with the official results.
According to investigations, these are not only files being altered. The digitalization of data goes into a software system that has already been manipulated before.
We ask for an audit to know the main codes, algorithms, and the randomness of the system.
In spite of the alerts and reports, the National Registration Office hasn't taken actions to eliminate electoral fraud.
We had reported about this before. We told them that illegal funding of campaigns could happen and how it could have been manipulated by corrupt political figures.
Colombians don't trust the results of the elections.
There is more behind this. We still don't know the whole truth, but we all must vote to take the power back.
Electoral corruption puts Colombian democracy in great risk.
The Vice President of the National Electoral Council, or CNE, Sandra Oblitas, says everything is ready for Sunday's general election. Oblitas said polling centers will receive their electronic voting machines on Friday and Saturday, while the President of the CNE, Tibisay Lucena, said the voting facilities are being secured. She added the materials handed over to the international observers are being held in their respective embassies and consulates in Venezuela. Still in Venezuela, people protested outside the United States Embassy in Caracas on Tuesday to oppose the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. The demonstrators reaffirmed the country's support to the Palestinian cause. They also condemned the use of military weapons by Israel at the Gaza border, where 60 people were killed on Monday and more than 2,700 were injured as Palestinians protested the U.S. move and demanded the right of return to their land, as they do every year. Also, people around Latin America have held protests demanding an end to crimes against the Palestinian people. Demonstrators gathered in Chile, home of the largest Palestinian community outside the Arab world, as well as in Brazil and Argentina. Turkey has ordered the Israeli Consul General in Istanbul to leave the country following the killings of Palestinian protesters by Israeli forces. Turkey has been among the most vocal critic of the Israeli use of deadly force against Palestinian demonstrators at the Gaza border. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan described Monday's bloodshed as genocide, and he called Israel a terrorist state. Paraguayan President-elect Mario Abdo Benitez says his government will reconsider the current administration's decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Abdo Benitez says Israel is a great friend of his country, but the decision has to be discussed with maturity. The current president, Horacio Cartes, announced at the beginning of the month that Paraguay will follow the United States and move its embassy to Jerusalem. That move is scheduled for the end of May. Meanwhile, Guatemala has opened its embassy in Jerusalem just 2 days after the United States. Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu attended the embassy's opening in an office complex in West Jerusalem. Guatemala was one of the few nations that backed U.S. President Donald Trump's decision in December to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The League of Arab States in Cairo will hold a meeting to discuss what they call the illegal relocation of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. The meeting will urge the League's permanent representatives to condemn this decision. The Arab League chief, Ahmed Abul Ghet, said the move was a clear violation of international law. Well, time now for a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Cuba is presenting its human rights record to the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. Cuba has to show the progress it made in applying its socio-economic model to guarantee as many rights as possible. This is the third time it's been reviewed by the UN Committee, which checks on human rights in all member countries every 4 years. Cuba is one of the countries with the best record in fulfilling the UN requirements, with more than 72% of them completed. And Cuba has signed a deal with the European Union to collaborate on renewable energy. The Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez and the EU representative Federica Mogherini signed the deal in Brussels. The two parties already have an agreement on food security and sustainable agriculture. We go now to Argentina, where the former president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, has been accused of money laundering and illicit association for public work carried out by one of her companies. A federal judge also prosecuted her children, Maximo and Florencia Kirchner, co-owners of the company Hotasur, for managing a hotel in which some businessmen allegedly paid bribes by hiring rooms. This is the fifth judicial process the former president has to face. Fernández says she's suffering from political persecution encouraged by the current president, Mauricio Macri. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Egaro Esteban, has more on the issue.
Each time there is a complex situation, each time there is an economic crisis like the one we are seeing now, with inflation of 2.7% in April and an inflation of almost 10% in the first 4 months of 2018. Some judicial case comes up about former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner to divert attention. Judge Julián Ercolini says that the former president has been persecuted in the Otesur case, in which her children Florencia and Máximo are also involved. $2 million or 800 million Argentine pesos were confiscated following the lawsuit. This is shifting attention onto the previous government's legacy while a severe economic crisis is hitting the country right now and casting doubt on the government of Mauricio Macri.
And still in Argentina, families and friends of the crew of the submarine that disappeared in the South Atlantic 6 months ago marched in silence to ask for the search mission to be continued. They gathered at the Mar del Plata naval base, where the 44 crew members of the Ara San Juan submarine were supposed to arrive last year. Over a dozen countries have supported Argentina in the search, but no trace of the submarine has been found so far. There is an ongoing investigation to determine what has happened and who should be held responsible for the disappearance.
All I ask is that you keep looking for them. Please, do not abandon them. I know the government thinks that retrieving the submarine is a lot of money, but do the 44 lives inside worth less than retrieving a submarine?
They are not doing things well. They do not act fast. We do not know how to ask them, what door to knock on so they can listen to us, that we need them to look for them and find them.
In Guatemala, the general prosecutor has said there is enough evidence to accuse President Jimmy Morales of illegally financing his 2015 electoral campaign. 5 businessmen who financed that electoral campaign have also been called to appear in court. They have already asked for forgiveness for giving $1.2 million to Morales' party, the National Convergent Front. The businessman will appear in court on June 1st.
The General Office of Electoral Offences is working on the possibility of submitting a case against the president. I believe the information should be ready in 15 days, so we will be able to proceed with the submission of the case.
Women in the Dominican Republic have gathered at the National Congress calling for the legalization of abortion. A delegation handed a letter to lawmakers where they warned that the criminalization of abortion is putting the lives, health, and dignity of women at risk. They are calling on Dominican public health care providers to allow abortion when the pregnancy is not viable or is the result of rape or incest. Abortion in the Dominican Republic is currently punished with 2 to 3 years of prison for women and 3 to 4 years for the doctors and medical staff involved.
We are going to continue our fight until a new law that respects women is passed. We want a criminal code that recognizes our rights. We say no to the bill proposed by Senator Felix Bautista because it means a step back for our access to health care and justice for victims of sexual violence.
The Vice-Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Sir Hilary Beckles, has described the UK's Windrush scandal, in which Britons of Caribbean origin were deported, as a morality tale. Speaking at a UE event in Jamaica, the Barbadian historian said that despite their contribution to the British economy, the Windrush generation had to endure the humiliation of being told that they would never be British.
Where next will they want us to labor? Where will be the next place where they will take us? Why do we not focus on building our economies and societies? And this is what the conversation is. If we have more economic growth in this region, will our people be exposed to this circuit of unskilled labor? So it comes back to us. It comes back to us. The ball is back with us, that we do in fact need to put all hands on deck to get our economies to function at a higher level of development. That is the cure. It's the only cure to all of this.
Outrage sparked after Argentina's Football Association, or AFA, released a dossier with instructions on how to seduce Russian women. The book was targeted to the managers, players and journalists that were attending a preparation course for the 2018 World Cup in Russia. The manual on Russian language and culture tells the men what to do to have a chance with a Russian woman. In one part of the dossier, it says Russian girls pay close attention to whether you're clean, you smell good, and you're well dressed. The first impression is very important to them. The manual also says there are many beautiful women in Russia, and not all of them are good for you. Be selective. The AFA has released a press statement saying the text was not meant to be part of the course and it was printed by a mistake. Well, that takes us into the second break of the show, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. North Korea has threatened to cancel a summit between the U.S. President Donald Trump and its leader Kim Jong-un. In a statement with the North Korean government said it's not interested in talks where the U.S. insists on a one-sided demand to give up its nuclear program. They have also rejected the suggestion of the Libyan model for denuclearization as suggested by the U.S. National Security Advisor. North Korea is skeptical about the Libyan model where Muammar Gaddafi gave up nuclear weapons after an agreement in 2002 to 2003 with the United States and the United Kingdom, but was then killed in NATO bombings. And in an abrupt move, North Korea also suspended high-level talks with the South over a joint military drill between the United States and South Korea. Pyongyang denounced the drill as a rude and wicked provocation and said it is against the trend of warming North-South ties. The talk between the two Koreas was scheduled for Wednesday. South Korea says it regrets the move and hopes that the talks will resume soon.
Inter-Korean talks must continue in order to discuss issues raised by the North. The government will pursue necessary measures through close consultations with relevant ministries to achieve sustainable development of inter-Korean relations and permanent peace settlement through the implementation of the Panmunjom Declaration.
And China has expressed its concern over the cancellation of the inter-Korean talks and urged both sides to avoid worsening the situation.
We support and hope that both sides of the DPRK and the ROK will follow the spirit of dialogue, reconciliation, and cooperation embodied in the Panmunjom Declaration, fully show the respect for each other's reasonable concerns, work toward the same directions, build mutual trust, and improve ties.
Burundi is mourning the brutal killing of 28 people last week. Here's more on that and some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
Burundi is holding burial ceremony for 28 victims who were killed on Friday in an attack by armed rebels in Cibitoke, northwest of the country. The attack came just a week before Burundians are due to vote in a key referendum that could extend the presidential term from 5 to 7 years. This would allow President Pierre Nkurunziza to rule for another 14 years until 2034. He has been in power since 2005. An estimated 1,200 people have been killed and 400,000 people have fled the country since the political unrest began in April 2015, according to the UN.
We will spare no effort to stop these criminals, and the work is at an advanced stage. Burundi is working closely with the Democratic Republic of Congo, which houses these criminals. We are calming the population. We will do everything to stop and punish these criminals according to the law.
Indonesian police have shot dead 4 men who used samurai swords to attack officers at the police headquarters in the city of Pekanbaru. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack. The strike comes days after a series of suicide bombings by ISIS militants targeting churches and a police building in the city of Surabaya, leaving 30 dead. Police say children were used as suicide bombers in the attacks. The Global Arms and Chemical Watchdog Organization says chlorine was probably used as a chemical weapon in a February attack on the Syrian town of Sarakeb. However, the watchdog did not say which country was responsible for the chlorine weapons use. An OPCW fact-finding team is currently awaiting results for town of Duma after medics said 40 people died in a chlorine and sarin attack in April. Syria and Russia have accused foreign hands in the use of toxic gas attack on the Syrian people.
The Scottish Parliament has formally rejected the UK's plan to take Britain out of the European Union. Lawmakers in the Edinburgh Assembly voted 93 to 30 against Theresa May's Brexit legislation, putting the UK on the brink of a major constitutional dispute. The dispute centers on who will have control of powers currently residing in Brussels, such as farming and fisheries, once Britain leaves the European Union. And hundreds of public healthcare workers took to the streets of Paris to condemn budget cuts to the French healthcare system. Protesters marched through the streets of the French capital to the Ministry of Health while chanting anti-Macron slogans. The French leader, Emmanuel Macron, is facing growing pressure from workers across the country, protesting against his labor reform proposals. And finally, a competition to find the tastiest French bread in Paris has been won by a baker from La Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. The Baguette Bake-Off was part of the Fête du Pain, or the Bread Festival, which encourages bakers to try new recipes and organize outdoor bakeries and public tastings. The prestigious contest aims to find the best baguettes baked in the French tradition. And that brings us right to the end of this news brief, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisiatv.net/English. You should also join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisia English, I'm Sani Gray. Thank you so much for watching.